Hello, and happy sunny Wednesday. I'm not gonna lie, I woke up very happy today with the sunshine streaming in. We're just gonna give it a couple of seconds because I know folks need to log in. So if this is your first time with us, hello. My name is Sadie Uribe, I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. Let me click there. There we go. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC Network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. And we are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive program, all provided at no cost. We are dedicated to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Lori, how are we feeling? Are we ready to talk shop? Ready to talk? I was actually maybe we're ready to maybe have a little fun today with Sebastian, our guest. We did a little pre-interview, folks, and let me tell you, we're gonna have some fun today.
We are, we're talking about funding, and whenever we talk about funding, we always get a lot of interest from the audience. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to have fun today. So, first of all, Sadie, can you believe that April's right around the corner? I went to look at my schedule and I was ready to, say, here's what I got left in March. I'm like, oh my God, April's coming up. So, here is already my April financial literacy series and everything that's coming from there. Once again, can't tell you enough how important it is to talk about your numbers, but we'll get into that today. So next week, I have Delia coming on from DF Accounting Services, and she's been on. She's one of the show's favorites as well. I've asked her to come on and talk a little bit about the QuickBooks syncing of data. Want to talk about Cal Savers for those of you who have to deal with that if you have employees. She's explaining to me a lot of mistakes that people make or things they don't understand in the accounting aspect, as well as something that's going to tie in today when you have certain types of loans, how it may not be showing up on your bank statement because you are really getting paid the amount after the loan had been taken out, and how that can be messed up on your accounting as well. So we're going to talk about all things accounting, etc., but we're going to focus on some things that she's seeing commonly as mistakes within her clients' documents. And then Adam is going to come on April 3rd, and then I'll tell you my whole April lineup. This is how I knew it was almost April. I said, oh my God, I better get that information out. But Adam is affectionately known as the Pitchinator, and he works with startups and existing companies and has worked with funding. And he is going to talk all about how to represent, how to present yourself in the most positive light to whether it's customers or investors. Now, today's little words of wisdom, hope I got shows in it, but today's my words of wisdom. I have just a few statements on this, and I'm going to make just a few comments before we get started. As you know, a lot of times where my comments come from for that week is things that I'm exposed to during the week, right? And it could be information I get from the IRS or just experiences I am having when consulting with clients. And unfortunately, it's a very sad thing, but I'm having a lot of clients contact me who are in financial trouble. They have been harmed still from COVID. They've been harmed from, being in business and not having the right cost structure, which is I talk about a lot. They may have been harmed additionally by the fires, but a lot of it has been over the time period, not really knowing one thing. It's a long sentence, but it's one thing. How many widgets, be it service or a product, do they need to sell? At what price to cover the cost to produce, cover their overhead, and have money left to invest in the company and pay themselves? They never really understood that number. And so they continued to borrow money, invest it in the company, buy inventory, sell that inventory if it's a product at possibly not a high enough selling price. And all they're doing is what's called unearned revenue. They're using deposits or future money to pay past, and they're really not making money but they're having enough money come in the bank account being fed by funds or borrowing money or customer deposits, etc. But eventually that catches up, especially if the next big deal doesn't come through. I really believe that entrepreneurs have been sold a bag of goods, if you will, that companies that are a larger size or people like myself who've been a CFO, we don't buy into it. We understand the difference between risk and gambling. Entrepreneurs been, well, it's a gamble. You just have to go with it. You got to have passion. You got to have belief. Passion doesn't buy a quart of milk, guys. Passion gets you out of bed in the morning to keep trying. There is a distinct difference between taking a educated, informed risk. It's a risk getting up and breathing in the morning, okay? Life is a risk and business is a risk. All that's true. But gambling is just rolling the dice and hoping. And there's a huge difference between the two. And I want to talk a little bit more about this in the next couple weeks, where it really is, if you're borrowing money, there's a banking term called usage of funds. This is going to be identified by banks that say, well, what are they planning on using the funds for? If they're trying to use the funds to buy inventory, technically when the inventory is sold, they should have the profits to pay for the loan again. That's why you don't see a credit line being 30 years, etc. So we're going to talk about how to get funding. We're also going to talk about responsible funding, if you will. And that's why I wanted to get us started with a few thoughts and a few just different considerations. So, with that, with no further ado, let's go to the excitement of today. It's so exciting for me to bring Sebastian De Vivo on. He has a PhD, he's an advisory at the PCC SBDC. He's going to share with us how small business owners can get funding for their company. We're going to be talking about companies that necessarily can't get a traditional loan or need to borrow smaller amounts of money. And he's going to tell you about all the wonderful things he does for his companies as well as through the PCC. So, Sebastian, welcome to the show. Thank you for always coming on. I sure do appreciate you. Are just so knowledgeable and such a gift for us to have on the show.
Absolutely, Laurie. Thank you so much for having me. And are you going to ask me the question now?
Okay, so I was picking on Sebastian. I told him I was going to ask him a very trick question I had in my back pocket, so I got him all nervous. Not yet, Sebastian. I got it in my back pocket still. We're going to start out by saying, have you always been a banker? Is that what you went to school for? Did you decide to go that route? Because I love that story. So tell us how
Uh,
you started in the world you're starting in now.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I figured it would be something along those lines. Yeah, so I think the first time I came on, Lori asked me, "Hey, what's your background? How did you get to here?" And I had a chuckle and I said, "Well, when I started, I went to college at 18, and my major was painting." My dad has always been in finance. He's always done financial advising and he's always worked on small businesses. So, my thought at the time was, what is the opposite of my father? And that was a painting degree. Obviously, that made for lots of fun conversations, on the dinner table, because what are you going to do with a painting degree? I don't know how many times I heard that. Eventually, I started, realizing, oh, I guess like a major in the opposite of my dad is not something that's going to help me in life. So I moved to archaeology, which, is similar, but much more fun because when you go to school for archaeology, you get to travel all over the place. You get to crouch down, dig, look at walls, find, all kinds of cool stuff coming out of the earth. You get to travel a lot, which was amazing. And that was fun. And I figured that was, uh, my compromise between the opposite of my dad and my dad. Um, and then once I graduated, I realized that, my only option was academia. Academics are brilliant, but crazy, crazy. And I was just like, you people are insane. So I was doing my postdoc at NYU. And when I finished that, I just grabbed my stuff, went back to LA, and ended up getting a job doing exactly what my father does. And here I am 15 years later.
love that story. I just love that story totally. And I agree. I taught for a small period of time at both USC and Pepperdine and entered a world that I wanted to get out so quickly. It was not my thing at all. Okay, so on the archaeology, that has always fascinated me. I always say I want you to talk about all the digs and stuff. So I'm just picking on you, Sebastian. Okay, so are the pyramids a Stargate or are they a coffin? What do you think they really?
Of course, yes, we have proof, but it's classified.
The academics admit that it's really a Stargate and it's not like a bunch of people carried some rocks up and placed them in place.
I will tell you one thing, Lori.
Okay,
Um,
okay, guys, we're gonna hear it. We're listening just
no,
between us, okay?
this is in grad school. So when I was there, the school had a dig. It's called Chavin in Peru, and it's a set of caverns. Um, One of the really crazy things was that they decided to start looking at sound because when you do archaeology, you dig up stuff, you have stuff, you look at it, you study it, and then you write it down. Nobody thinks about sound, but we had these pyramids and these like tunnel systems, and they realized that the way sound traveled was incredibly sophisticated, and there was ways that they could pitch sound from like, way, way on the other side of the pyramid, and it would just roll and come to this side of the pyramid. So the kind of stuff that they could do like thousands of years ago was pretty insane. So, we laugh at the Stargate thing, but this is pretty crazy. So, I don't know.
I know, and see, it's so funny because yeah, I told you I was gonna pull a question out of my pocket that you would never expect me to ask you,
I did
but
not, yeah.
when it comes to the sound, oh, I've been studying like the King's Chamber and all of the sound acoustics in it. So yeah, I laugh. I think it's a Stargate, guys. So okay, now we're gonna get to some serious stuff, but I think it's a Stargate.
Great question. Thank you. That was fun.
I told you I was gonna shock you. Okay, I love it. We're talking about the Egyptian pyramids now. This is hilarious. Guys, don't you think we should make him come back and we should just talk about the Egyptian pyramids someday? Okay, Sebastian, back to funding. Okay, so, like I said at the very beginning, I want to talk about microfunding, and I'm going to really give you the floor to kind of start from there. But what I'd like to also try to isolate in categories so people understand, and even myself, because you're in this world much more than I do believe, and I'm going to start out by just saying a statement, and then you override everything and say what really is okay, true, okay? I think that there are many times that there is available microfunding and it's definitely worth it to companies and it gives them a great opportunity. But then I think there's these small loans that you get through like PayPal and stuff that are very damaging. And so I think all are not the same. And how do we navigate when this is a good small microfund, this is not a good microfund, and where to go from there? And I'm hoping Sebastian's not froze. Sadie?
Sebastian just got a little excited by all that very fun info. So I see him on his audio here. So
I
he'll
do
come back.
too. He'll
He'll
come
come
back. He'll
back.
come back. Well, I will just chat in the meantime of what I'm talking about till Sebastian's comes back. With that, there's many of these, and they have different names and I merchant funds, etc. And you can get those through PayPal and other type of institutions. And these are very, very easy to access. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of small companies take advantage of these. What the companies are really doing is they're looking at your sales. They're identifying how much sales you have. They give you a short-term loan. They take the money directly from the sales before they put the leftover, if you will, into the bank account. There's no way of really identifying what the actual interest rate is. I've even tried from an accounting perspective, and Dahlia will be talking about that next week. And what it does is it harms people in many ways. I have had different banker people, I should say banker people, different people I know in finance report that they've tried to back calculate some of these loans. And one person reported to me they saw a loan at actually 30%. I'm seeing them way higher than credit cards. So you think, well, don't use your credit card to get financing. And what I'm seeing is people actually taking out some of these loans and unknowingly paying much higher than they would even if they did a credit card loan, right? Credit card charge or what have you. And in that, it's also challenging because people get multiple loans and then they try to get a bank to take out those loans. They get so over their head with all of these, they have no cash flow coming in, so they try to get a traditional loan to borrow to pay down some of these other loans, and banks, et cetera, won't touch them. They just won't touch them. They kind of look at it like, okay, this is definitely tainted now. I can't even touch this. I can't get out of it. So what happens is people end up backing themselves in a corner with these loans where they're actually paying higher than they really should have or could have even, and then they can't get out of them. So you guys can tell me in the Q&A if any of you have these type of loans, you know what I'm talking about and you understand. And Sadie, we're still live, right? It's not me that's froze, correct?
Now we're here. We're hanging out.
I just wanted to make sure. I was like, I don't think I'm frozen. I'm still with you. So while Sebastian's clicking back in, we'll have a communication with you guys in the audience. But so I'm assuming that some of you, at least we got a pretty good number here. Some of you have these type of loans and they really can be trouble. So while I'm waiting for Sebastian to come in, yes, I can see people have these loans I'm talking about. While I'm having Sebastian come on, here he is, he's coming back. I actually will wait. He's probably actually almost here, so I won't get in mid thought. We're gonna have fun today. We'll talk about the pyramids till he comes back. But
Right? We see it live in action just happening, Lori. Like this is the real world.
it is the real world, and,
No,
and we all live in the real.
I think the
There you go.
CIA cut I think that I think the CIA cut my internet because we were about that.
Yes, see, that's what we get for talking about the real truth of the pyramids. Now I got a friggin' helicopter over my roof right now. No kidding.
I know. I'm so
Sebastian,
sorry. The internet collapsed, but I'm on my phone, so.
no worries. And all I did is I talked about they're called merchant loans and different names. I talked about how damaging they can be, and all I did from a quick outline is I talked about how the interest rate is unknown. It can be even higher than you imagine, often higher than a credit card, and then it's hard to get another bank to even take them out. You're almost tainted once you have these loans. So that's all I got to, was kind of describing what I meant by merchant day loans. I'll let you take it from there anywhere you want to go, Sebastian.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, those things are insidious. And I don't know if you mentioned, so Obama, they passed the Dodd-Frank law, which was essentially a way to control credit banks and credit card companies so that they wouldn't, so they would cap interest. And what they did was they came up with these merchant cash advances and they call them um, a purchase of future receivables, and that's just a way to not call it a loan. And I've seen interest rates of 110% on those.
Wow, and I just announced that if somebody told me, and I was surprised, they said it can be even 30%, and you're telling me 100. Wow. And
It's
you have no
unbelievable.
way of knowing, because Sebastian, I tried to back calculate it for
Mhm.
accounting tax returns. They don't give you enough documents for you to even, you got to fill in a blank and kind of guess. So you're literally borrowing money and no friggin' clue what the interest rate. How wrong is that?
On purpose. And I have emails where the person is like, can you send me what my interest rate is? Because I'm preparing a debt schedule because obviously I want to refinance this.
Right.
And they're like, oh, you can calculate it or you just need to go there. And they never say it because they know what happens if they tell somebody your interest rate is 110%. They're not going to be happy.
And I think the worst part too that I mentioned, Sebastian, is that these are so easy to get that people are just jumping on the bandwagon of getting them. And I'm going to say something really hard here, Sebastian. If a company needs it that desperate, I would rather see them close down than start playing this game. Now, that may be a little bit of a hard thing, but I just never see it go right, and sometimes you do borrow for a short period of time with good reason. I'm not saying that. But if you're going to start maintaining the company's existence with use of these loans and propagating it, is what I'm saying, just get out of it is where I'm going. But anyway, I'll let you go with this.
Yeah, and that's really tricky, and I think it's very important to think about because, I've had people come in with them and I've been able to help them refinance. I've had people talk to me and say, "This is all I can get." And I always tell them, "Look, you need to make the decision for you, but here are the potential consequences. If you take out money that you can't afford to pay 1 month from now, what's going to happen 1 month from now?" And if they say, I have a confidence that I can get it refinanced. I'm just waiting for this to happen or waiting for that to happen. Obviously we can't tell anybody what to do, but we can say you can make that decision, but this is the risk that you're taking. So, if you're taking on a loan that you can't pay a month from now, thinking you can save your company, you're not saving your company. You're just making a bigger mess down the line. So, if you need to, make sure you have a plan and be really, really confident in that plan because it's not a good, if you're in a bad place now, imagine where you'll be, 2 months from now when, it's 50,000 added to your debt and, $1,000 weekly payment. Those are not fun to pay.
No, and I'm on the other side with people calling it financial trouble and bankruptcy, so I get that. Well, let's go on the other side of the positive opportunities for microfunding and the CDFIs. Did I get that right? CDFIs, yeah. Let's talk about what is a CDFI. Who is all playing in the microfunding world from a lender perspective? Who are these microfunding? What does the word microfunding even mean? So that's a whole lot, Sebastian. I want you to just take it from there and help our audience understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's becoming much, much more important now. It used to be that, it was harder to get a $50,000 loan than $1 million loan because banks make money on $1 million loans and they lose money on anything under that. But, somewhere down the line, they came to realize that, when the SBA says small business, they're like, 50 million in revenue and below and like 200, employees or something. And that's not small business. That is not small business. And they realize that they need to help small business, one, two people on payroll, that these are the people that need that help. So they came up with a community development finance institution, the CDFI, and that's essentially designed to deploy tools and methods to, I don't want to say approve, but to help fund these loans that banks don't want to do. At the end of the day, banks, it's their money and their job is to make more. So they're not, you can't force them to lend you money. But the kind of in between, the compromise that they found was banks would give um, the money or the loan to these CDFIs, then the CDFIs would do the work and they would do what it took to get them approved. Now, what that means is when you apply to a CDFI, they want to see your business plan, they want to see your projections, they want to see your background, they want to see your marketing plan, they want to know you and they want to ask you questions about, how are you going to handle this? How are you going to do that? And essentially what they're doing is, yeah, they're trying to figure out what level of risk you bring because, they have to make sure that they don't lose their money, but they're also looking for ways to build a story to take to their underwriter and say, this is why you need to make this loan. Yes, they made 100,000 in revenue last year, and yes, that shouldn't qualify them for 50, but they have a contract with LAUSD, but they may have a contract in the works with Costco. So those subjective things, those anecdotal things that are why you should get the money that no bank would ever look at, they're the ones that are supposed to look for it, find it, and then use it to help you.
Okay.
So we do have several in LA, and I've been really fortunate because I've gotten to work with really, really cool ones. And the thing about CDFIs is that they're not money makers. It's not where like the Wall Street people are going to go. almost everybody that I've met there is there because they believe in what they're doing, because they want to help small businesses. So they'll go the extra mile. And that, that makes a huge difference, because at the end of the day, the way you submit a loan is you talk to a loan officer. They're your representative at the CDFI, and it's their job to collect everything, to build a package, to make sure that your request makes sense. But the person who decides the yes or no is an underwriter, and underwriters are always shielded from the public. So you can't go talk to an underwriter and be an advocate for yourself and say, this is why you need to give me this. The loan officer is the one that does that. And when you have a loan officer that believes in what they're doing and wants to do what they're doing, it makes a big difference when it goes back to the underwriter.
Now,
So it's been really good to see.
is the underwriters at the CDFI? It's not at the bank. So when the funds come from the bank, is the funds transferred to a CDFI and the underwriting and the choices stay within the CDFI then?
So the bank is saying, we're not going to do these loans, but we're going to give this money to a CDFI so they do them with our money. So, yay us, we're good. Like, we
Okay.
don't. So everything is run by the CDFI, but it's with their money. And sometimes it's a loan, sometimes it's a warehouse line of credit, which is basically, the CDFI can draw and deploy. Sometimes it's grants.
Gotcha. Now walk me through, how is a CDFI? I know the SBAs are different because they're guaranteed the money at the bank. I get that aspect of it. But is there a dollar amount, like I would go to a CDFI rather than an SBA 7A because I want to borrow just a small amount? I'm making that assumption. Is that correct? So it's kind of the dollar amount puts you in a CDFI versus an SBA. And is there any
Yeah,
kind of delineation we can have in our mind about that?
that's a great question. Yes. So uh, when I talk to somebody, the amount that they're asking for is what tells me where we're going to go. Even within CDFIs, there's a few that, they cap at 30 or 50 because that's where they feel comfortable. There's a few that, don't want to go over 100 or 150, and there's a couple that will go up to about 350. Now, the decision is with the CDFI on whether to give the loan or not. Now, most CDFIs can also do SBA guarantees and state guarantees. So the CDFI, so for example, if we're doing a $350,000 loan, even if it's with a CDFI, it'll be with an SBA guarantee because they do have that the capacity to do it. And if there's usually no collateral. These are early stage companies, so they're very risky. So if they can, they will always bring the SBA guarantee in, or the state guarantee, which is the same thing.
Gotcha. Now, what do you think is driving so many to these merchant, or I think they're called merchant loans, the pay loans, et cetera? Could they have possibly got funded through a CDFI and they just don't know to go there? Or are they just never going to get funded and this was their only option? I know there's no general answer, but just in hypothetical, are people maybe choosing to take these loans just because they don't know other options are in existence and there is a better option for them? I guess that's the way for me to ask that question.
Yes. So okay. So I mean, it's complicated. So the
No.
first these guys, their business model is that they are taking on high risk loan situations. And when I say high risk, it means that they only have a very limited amount of data to make their decision. And then their business model says, okay, if we are going to lend to people based on, a two-page application, then we're going to charge them 30, 50, 75% interest. And their assumption is that, maybe one out of three companies is going to go down because of that payment. And the interest rate that they charge the other two that didn't go down is what keeps them profitable. So they are gambling essentially and pricing that gamble. Um, Now, because they have money, they advertise. So you see them online all the time. So when we think, and they don't advertise saying, we're a predator and we're going to give you a shark loan. They're like, we're going to give you cash fast. And so for a lot of people, it's the timing that drives the decision. Because when you go to a CDFI or you do a microloan, you have to submit a full package, you have to do projections, business plan, marketing plan, and then they ask you questions. So it's not a quick process. So, for somebody who's like, I could be here 6 to 8 weeks waiting to get funded by a CDFI, or I could get the cash tomorrow. A lot of them just say tomorrow, and then that gets them uh, uh, in that cycle.
Yeah, and you know what I think in that, Sebastian? I think it goes without saying that we have to bring back thoughts that were always in business at least a decade, if not less. And that is that you plan for the financing event ahead of time. So I'm going to
Yes.
make a comment. I can see where you're going with this, Sebastian. You're going to agree. So I'm going to give him my personal opinion. This is my personal opinion, and then you can take it wherever you want. I feel like in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, companies have gotten in this bad habit of just being in reactive without a plan and just saying, let me get money, let me keep going, let's see it's going back to what I was saying at the beginning. They're gambling, they're not taking risk. And I think we got to get out of that bad habit and go back to pre-planning and asking these questions. What is the money for? And then you are able to take the time to wait, because to me, and I'll end it on this, Sebastian, if you need the money that fast, that by itself means you got to step back and ask why.
Right. Right. No, I mean you hit the nail on the head, and that's really, really, really critical because if you're in survival mode, if you're in reactive mode, then that means that you're likely in a desperate position, and that's precisely when lenders don't want to give you money because their assumption is that you're not going to make the correct rational decision. Sometimes the correct decision is this is just not a strong model, and you have to shut it down. But when you're in an emotional place, it you may make decisions that are gonna be hurtful to you or the business, and you're gonna end up losing that money anyway. So just as a rule of thumb, remember this: banks don't want to give you money, and I'm including CDFIs, when you need it. They want you to plan ahead and ask to fund your growth. Now, all growth costs money. Um, and if you get out of that reactive survival mode and think about it and plan it out, then you should have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be. So let's say you're in e-commerce and right now your return on ad spend is 1 to 3. And you know that if you were to add certain products or invest more in ads, that's going to help you increase your return on ad spend and therefore increase your revenue. um, Plan it. Say in 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12 months, I need an injection of $50,000, and that is going to be half for product, half for ads. And that is going to generate $200,000 for me because you've done the math, because you've thought it through. And then ask when you're doing well, when you're at a good rhythm, you're making money. That's when the bank wants to give you the money. If it gets to the point where you're like, shit, if I don't get this right now, I'm going down. It's not it. They're gonna smell it, and they're not gonna want to give you the money. So that
You know,
planning is crucial.
it is, and yeah, I spent a period of time, a small period of time as a banker on purpose. I actually never wanted to be a banker. I determined to be a banker after my MBA to get the insight. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to understand how banks looked at it because I had enough experience sitting across the table to know there was something I didn't know, and my CFO knowledge wasn't giving me all the data. So I set out to be a banker and did this thing for a while just to get inside information. And it was one of the most miserable jobs I've ever had. I would say that it was one of the most miserable things I ever did in my life. And partly because I come from a position of being a consultant, a helper, and now I'm on this opposite side. But it was one of the best things I ever did in my life. And one of the conclusions I came to is what you just said about banks. a lot of times when banks won't lend you, you really should step back and say, is this even a good model? Because they get, I'm not saying banks are great or bad. I'm not making any comment, but sometimes when they don't lend, it's because they're looking at the business model and its flaws that the business owner is not looking at. So there's a really good reason for that. And I fully agree. And going back to the planning, I'm going to take a minute to just kind of do a plug for the SBDC. This is why it's so important to have, SBDC, you don't have to charge, you get these type of advisors that have great experts in their field to look at the numbers and get a feel for where you're going and plan in advance. So I just want to do a plug because Sadie will put information for yourself, myself, as well as the SBDC and the need to look at these numbers. So now I'm only going to go to two places I know because I don't know many in this world, but at least I can communicate with you what I'm trying to talk about. So now as we look at, we've got the CDFIs. Now I want to go into other micro lenders, and I don't even know much about these companies, but I say them and then you'll know where I'm talking about, like the Jewish Foundation and Opportunity Fund. I use those as my pet examples, right? There may be better ones, but what are they and how do they play in this microfunding group?
Yeah, the Jewish Free Loan Association, the JFLA, is an anomaly. Um, I always start with them because they are just amazing. They're an amazing resource. Now, what they are is a microloan, 36,000 and under at 0% interest. And they're not like a regular loan where it requires that you submit all kinds of documentation and reply to all kinds of questions. They really just want to talk to you, excuse me, get a sense that you know what you're doing mostly. And then the way that they're managing their risk, and this is the beauty of the model. Um, and this is exactly what they were doing in 1900. So they wanted to give startup capital to Jewish immigrants coming into LA, and obviously there was no data that they could use to determine if there was a risk. So what they came up with is they said, well, if one person who knows them can stand up and say, I will pledge to their character, I will co-sign for the loan, I will be responsible if something happens, then we should be able to lend this startup capital because we have somebody backing them up. And that's exactly what they do now. So if you have one guarantor, you can borrow up to 7,500, and if you have two, you can borrow up to 36,000, and that's the model. Two people with jobs and the ability to pay the loan are saying, if something happens, we're here and we'll take care of it, and that's all they're looking for. So it's an amazing, you don't need to be Jewish. It's an amazing resource. And, at 0% interest, you cannot get anything cheaper other than grants, which is free money. So for a lot of people, it's hard because it's not like you can walk around and get two people to co-sign on a loan for you. But if it's even a possibility, that's always where I want to start because that's going to be the cheapest microloan you can get.
Yep, yep. Now, how about like Opportunity Fund? I've had a couple clients in the past. It's been some years. I don't know if they're still a predominant player that has got money through Opportunity Fund. And the little experience I had is it was easier to get. One of them even used a car as collateral, but the interest rates were not kind. They were a little bit higher from what I remember. So I may not be correct on any of the things I said, but you fill in the blank.
No, you are. So Opportunity Fund merged with Acción in San Diego, and there's a few players. So it's called the Acción Opportunity Fund now, Inclusive Action for the City, TMC Community Capital. These are all I don't want to call them fintechs, but they're techie organizations that are saying, hey, we have different ways of, determining risk that are not the traditional ways that the bank uses. And we think that we can make good loans to the people that are excluded from the banking system. So Opportunity Fund, that was their thing, right? We're going to look at their other repayments. So they would look at, your cable bill or your utilities, and they would say, oh, this person pays back their loans. Therefore, even though they can't prove that their business has the ability to take on this debt, the fact that this person shows responsibility and repayment is enough for us to make the loan. And that's basically how they did it. Now, they don't do that, so Opportunity Fund, and there was one called Camino Financial. Those were the two that were like, we are going to use software to revolutionize how you do microloans. Neither one of them worked. Camino Financial was bought out by someone else, and Opportunity Fund merged with Acción. So that promise didn't pan out. Most of them are now like in that CDFI mode, and most of them will still do the traditional underwriting that a CDFI does. But there's still players popping up every once in a while that are saying there's a different way to do this, and this is how.
That makes me want to go back to these merchant like Shopify. Another person was talking about Shopify. They're another one in that. When you look at it, and once again, I'll say things and you correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but in a way, they use this computer model because they're looking in their database and they're saying, oh, look, they sell this many, and all they care is you're selling and you're getting the revenue because they're taking it from you before you even get it. And what I feel like is, why do they get to charge such a high interest rate? Because interest rate's tied to risk, but they're grabbing the money first on a track record to show you at least sold that amount. And I think where the problem is, just because you sold it doesn't mean you're profitable to pay that back. And so it's just like, I just find it so wrong in so many ways.
Yeah, and Shopify is actually interesting because I have seen them do pretty decent loans.
Oh, okay.
Usually it'll be the third or fourth time. So, everybody starts out at Shopify, between 12 and 15% of their daily sales is what they keep as their repayment. But I have seen them, after two or three, they'll take it down to 8% or something like that. So, and I think you said it, because this is about risk and data. So the way you want to think about it is, the more the lender knows about you, the less risk they will take in lending to you, and therefore the better terms they can give you. A CDFI, for example, they'll read your business plan, marketing plan, forecast. They'll look at your everything. They'll look at your sales history. Most of them, whenever I do an application, the way I talk to the person I'm advising is, we are across the table from somebody who's trying to figure out what can go wrong. And they are going to ask us for documents to prove that whatever they're thinking won't go wrong. They're going to ask us for strategies or plans, and all that is data. They know more and more and more about you the more they talk, and so then the more they know, the less risky it becomes when they give you the money. So that's why they can get you to a more reasonable interest rate. Now, the problem is that most of them are variable rate. They sit on top of prime, and prime is at 7.5 right now. So you're still seeing 9, 10, 11, 12% interest, but ideally, as the prime rate goes down, so will the interest. Um, but
Gotcha.
that's the thing, right? So one of those fintechs, they'll go by your address, your personal credit score, and maybe a couple other things about you online. So they don't know anything about you. So their risk is very high, and they're going to price it. A CDFI spent 8 weeks asking you a bunch of questions, so they know a lot about you. So they're going to, that lowers their risk, and therefore you get better terms.
And what we're talking about here, and I just want to bring it down into detail and clarity for the audience to understand, because you and I both know what we're speaking of, is I don't think a lot of people, a lot of small companies understand to the importance the verbiage they say and the numbers they show matter in their potential to get a loan. And I want to take one more sentence before I hand it back to you. You have mistakes in your QuickBooks file because you've been syncing the data and you never looked at your balance sheet. You present that to a bank banker or whoever you're presenting it to, someone like myself can see it in 2 seconds, you're going to have a hard time getting me to convince any of the data is correct. And if you go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to use the money for, like we're just chatting away. And that's where I always say, once again, having somebody at the SBDC look and help you in the introductions matter. So I want to do two things on that. I'm going to actually do three. I'm going to let you go on a roll. So one, how much that conversation and your data matters. Number two, I'm going to let you go. They're two different ones, but I'm going to have you go in both. Sebastian, I'm still getting these stupid things that are said to me all the time. I'm going to open an LLC, then the company can borrow the money. Okay, take both of those. I know. I just want to make sure we get both of those out. I'm getting it. I swear somebody told me it's being said on TikTok, and that has to do with it too. So talk about the legal structure, who really borrows the money, and what you say and what you show matters. That's a whole handful for you.
Oh my Lord, yes. Yes. I mean, I think second thing, absolutely. Just because you're an LLC, they're not going to lend you money. And, I get the calls that, like, I'm a woman or I'm disabled or I'm a minority. And, we think that there are government programs giving out that money, and that's not the
No,
case. The
thank you for saying
SBA,
that, Sebastian. I say it all the time. Thank you for saying that, because I know people are like, "How did you say that, Lori? Here's the helicopter over my No, it's so true. Thank you. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt, but that's a passion one.
right. The SBA is, unless it's a disaster, the SBA is not a loan. The SBA is a guarantee. The decision to give you the loan comes from the bank, the CDFI, the lender. And once they've decided to lend you the money, they go to the SBA and they say, this is risky. I need you to guarantee it. So if they don't pay me, you pay me. That's what the SBA program is. And that's the state guarantee as well. These are guarantees. These are not money being given out for people because of, whatever. So the lender is absolutely going to look at what you're saying because that's what they have to go on. If you're a big company, you have years and years of historical financials and P&Ls and statement of cash flows, and they have the data to look and make a decision. So, will a big company qualify for capital? Yeah. Why? Because there's tons of data certified by CPAs, you
Yep.
know, uh, that they can trust. So therefore, if a bank is saying, "Hey, you're asking me for this much money, and I've seen that, for the last 3, 5, 10 years, you have shown the cash flow to pay it," that's easy for them. That's not a hard ask. But we don't have that. We're small businesses. So, since we can't say, here are my financials that prove that I could have been paying this the whole time, we have to say something else. And what we say, that's what they go by. And again, this is a person sitting on the other side of the table trying to figure out if you're going to pay your loan. There's no algorithm, there's no computer, there's no magic formula. The magic formula is what they used with the big companies, and that comes from the numbers. But for you and I, they're looking at me and they're saying, they're trying to figure out if I'm going to pay it or not. And so, as much data as they can get from me, that's how they're going to make their decision. So if you're like, I need money, I just kind of want to have it there just in case. I mean, they're going to slam the phone down that instant. They're not interested. Well, I kind of want to put it into marketing. Nope. They're going to be like, thanks, but no thanks. You have to say, I need this much to do this so that I can make this much. So you borrow money to make money and you show the trail from beginning to end. If you show that to the bank, then you're starting from the right place because they're like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. They have a strategy. They have calculated how much they expect to make out of this money that I'm lending them, and they've convinced me that their calculation is solid. So then you're in business.
And it's absolutely true, because as you made that sentence, being the banker mind and put my little banker hat, the next sentence after that is when they says, and this is the money I'm going to make, the banker says, and this is how you're going to pay me back the loan. That's how it all gets complete, because they want to
That's all
know.
they care about.
Yeah, that's all they care about, and another aspect, and you're so correct about the LLC, is I try to explain to people that they think that the company is standing up and that's the one that's borrowing. And I always explain to them that they personally, and PGs and personal guarantees, they're the ones that are being looked at as credit worthy. They're the ones taking out the money. The money is then being used in the company. And I tell them, just like I would be having to qualify to get a car. I would use the funds to buy the car, but I wouldn't say the car's getting qualified to get the car. I would say I am. It's that same thing. And going back to the financials being certified, et cetera, even in a company, well, the one I remember mostly recently, as a CFO on my private side, right? It was 30 million. It'd been in business 10 years. The financials were reviewed because of existing loans. I could not get the bank to take off personal guarantees even then. It's really challenging. I finally did get them to take a personal guarantee off one of them. So people,
Wow.
yeah, and it's really challenging. They don't like, even in that side, middle market America, as we would talk about in companies, about 60, 70 million, I could get away with no personal guarantees. But when you get into 10, 20, and 30, they still want their clause in a personal guarantee. So somebody who's a small business starting out thinking that they're going to get a loan with that's unsecured over 20,000 at the least, it's not going to happen. I'll let you take it from there to keep going on this concept of who is actually taking out the loan and what does the usage of funds mean.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm probably gonna get blasted on TikTok because there's so many people saying that you need to build your business credit and that's what's
Oh,
gonna
I
get you
know.
the loan. And no, that's not the
No,
way it works.
not,
So the reason you incorporate as a company is to draw a line between your personal assets and the company's assets. So when you borrow money, technically there's a line between your assets and the company. So what the bank does is require a personal guarantee, like Lori mentioned, that gives them a backdoor access to your assets so that if something happens, they're still collateralized with your assets. So that is a way for the bank to get around the limited liability that you get as a corporation. I have never seen a loan without a personal guarantee, and I've worked with companies up to 20 million in revenue. And I believe you that you have to be in the 60 and above to get there because they the short answer is they can. you
yeah,
know, a bank can do that. They can collateralize many times over. So if they're going to have an SBA guarantee and they're going to have, access to your personal assets and your personal assets are 10 times the value of the loan, they're going to do it because they can.
yeah.
Is it wrong? Hell yes. Can they do it? Yeah. Will they? You tell me. Of course they're going to do it.
And it's
So,
the risk concept, they're not, they're not 100% positive it's going to happen the way you say it's going to be, but they're positive they can get that house, you know?
Right. And that's the key, right? Because at the end of the day, we're always looking at the future. So I always thought it was hilarious that when you're an existing business and you go to a bank and you ask for a loan, they look at the last 2 years of your tax returns, they look at your net profit, and all they're doing is calculating to see if there's enough net profit to cover the payment for the loan that you're asking. So when I said before, their rationale is, could you have paid me back the last 2 years for this loan that you're asking me for? That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it 10
Right,
days from now or a year from now.
right.
That's their system and that's how they approach it. But, we're still talking about the future and stuff happens. So they will protect themselves as much as they can to the detriment of us because they can.
And it gets even worse when you have different economic fluctuations because it's historical and you don't know if it necessarily happened. It's interesting what you said about how they just look at numbers. So I told you my banking experience was like one of the worst experiences ever, right? And prior to that, I didn't have a lot of experience in finance and numbers, and I kind of thought I was not as smart as any of these really smart people. So this is where I'm going to go with it. So I was told you got to go out and get everybody's financials, and I'm a consultant, so I'm like looking at at them, and I come back and I put the person's financials on the table and the underwriter comes in, right? And I sit down and I'm still going, okay, their revenue and their cost of goods, and I'm studying them like I would, right? And before I even got to the third line, they go, well, debt to equity, no. And I'm like, oh my God, they're so smart. They read the entire financials in seconds. And then I realized, no, they did two calculations and said no, because it's based on calculations. Sebastian, as silly as that sounds saying now, at that point, this was decades ago when I did this, I had no idea that it really comes down to some basic numbers on whether or not you're going to get the loan. And the story is an enhancement. It's not a baseline that it's decided upon.
Right. Right. And, for every dollar that any institution, CDFI, microlender, bank has to lend, there's, 10, 50, 100 people in line for it. So you were trying to help the person in front of you because that's what you were doing. They just want to cut out as many maybes as possible so they can make the easiest. So the person that qualifies 5 times over, who's in line with the person that doesn't, they want to get the person that doesn't out of the way. So, the fastest you can say no on whatever reason you have, they're out of the way. And now you can go look for the one that, has all the collateral. And to me, it was unreal because this was really early on. I was doing a loan for this woman. It was 60,000, 60,000. And she had her company cash flowed, so she showed the ability to pay the loan for the last 2 years. Her projections were solid, her business plan was solid, she had vendors, she had her supply chain, she owned her home, and she owned a commercial building in, I want to say Inglewood or something. Between the home and the commercial property, she had 2.5 million in asset and like 1.5 million in equity. They asked her to pledge everything. So, she pledged 1.5 million in equity, 2.5 million in property on a $60,000 loan. And when she called me crying in a rage, like, why are they asking me this? And, what I told her was because they can.
Because they
Because if
can't. Yep, I had somebody do that. I looked at some of their numbers and I said, "Why is your entire home pledged? Now you can't even borrow any more money." And so I actually got another banker to take them out, right? And that means get another banker to fund it and pay off this banker to get their hands off that home so they could use the home for a credit line, because they can't. And that's where it really is important to have this representation. And also, I do have to mention, we have to consider that the banks are lending out your deposit, so they have an FDIC requirement. We always have to give them a little bit of understanding that they are limited because it is our money they're lending out that they have to.
right, right, no, I mean, and they're not a charity. Their mandate is to make money. So that's what they're trying to do. The loan officer is trying to find good companies to lend the money, and the underwriter is trying to protect that fund from default and risk. So, it's not that they're evil. I mean, it's not that it's okay. How do I say this? Um, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
They're supposed to be protecting the fund. So,
that's a
yeah,
very good way to do it. And you already answered the pyramid and got the CIA, so you're so over it now.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
don't ask you anything else because then they'll take off my phone too.
And we only got a minute left, but I want to get this out, so I'm going to go a little longer to say it. And I think there is a conversation to be had of the importance and benefit of good old bootstrapping. Don't feel like you have to grow so fast overnight. Sell a few widgets, sell some service, get some profit, use that to grow, and grow intelligently and slowly and not require. Now, I'm not saying that can be true of all companies, but I'm also saying every company doesn't need funds as well. It can grow organically. And Sebastian, some of the companies I've seen that grown slow and organically are the longer lasting ones as well.
For sure. And, that implies that you are thinking strategically. That implies that you're looking at the future and making a plan. It's when you do that that you make solid decisions, right? So, um, do I need cash to grow? Absolutely. Growth costs money. Do I need it now to do what I need now? I don't know. You need to figure it out. You need to look and see how can you position yourself the best way possible to get what you need and continue your growth, as beneficially to your company as possible. And that requires planning.
Yep. I think that's a beautiful place to end on this. Sebastian, thank you so much for coming back on. I want to say that your dad is very proud of you. You actually, I know you wanted to go off and do the opposite of the dad. Okay, you are so good at this. The apple did not fall far from the tree, and it just had to find its way back into the basket. I think, Sebastian.
Yeah, no, I love what I do. Every day is a joy for me. So, we just have to go through our processes.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's so funny. I had to do the same thing. I mean, one day on an Ask Lori, I'll tell you guys about
I'm
my
going to ask you next time.
I know because I have like my degrees is the first one's an applied associates in science and biology and research, and I also have a certification in NLP, neuro linguistic programming. So there you
Wow.
go. In addition to my MBA, EA, and BS in undergrad in business, I have some weird little tag-ons too, and I believe the pyramids are a stargate. So go from there.
Yes, yes, they are.
Oh my God, this was so much fun. Sebastian, I'm going to bug you to come back on again because, you could tell from the audience, they love this kind of conversation. What I love about it is they're so used to having just, those boring, raw banking discussions. When we talk, they get to see behind the scenes. They get to have an understanding of the industry. And someday, maybe on an Ask Lori, I'll share with everybody about my experiences of being a banker and how this little tiny country farm girl had a rude awakening to the way that the world really worked and said, eek, I don't like it. How's that? Any last comments for the audience today, Sebastian?
Take advantage of SBDC. This is free advice. Our only metric is for you to succeed. So we are actually on your side. We don't have any other interest. So take advantage of us, ask us questions, do the work. That's what we're here for.
I love that. That is so well put. Our only agenda is for you to succeed. I think that,
Mhm.
Sadie, we got to get that in our marketing because isn't that just a beautiful way to say it? That is our only agenda. We don't even really buy into what you do. It's your choice. We just want to see you succeed. And I always like to say, and be a little happy too.
Oh, please, yeah.
Sadie, you want to come in and shut us down here?
I think you just gave me the warm fuzzies with that last little rhyme like there. Well, I mean, if anything, if you look in the chat, you know what everyone is saying thank you because how Lori said, you just made it understandable and it's like it's fun. We're like having a good time while we're doing this. And it's like, who says you can't learn and have fun at the same time?
That's the only way you can, because you know what I always say, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it. I've been that way since a kid, and I seem to have gotten away with it this long, so I'm going to continue in that pathway. And I love it. And Chris, okay, Chris, big fan. He picked up my line. I got to comment before I go. And a 4 1/4 mil. Mwah, mwah, to Chris. That's what I always say. And I always did that with any time I would even talk to the students in school, when I was teaching, and they go, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And I go, yeah. Can you afford a quart of milk? That is always mine. I still use it today. People are going through the financials, and this is going to happen. And in the grocery store, you're going to tell them how cool you are because you can't buy the quart of milk. Okay, guys, we got to end. We had so much fun today. Thank you so much, Sebastian. As you guys know, Sadie is going to stay behind. You can get Sebastian's information, my information, get an email out if you want to be a guest on the show or if you need a one-on-one. And tomorrow on Thursday, just for those shout out that are coming on my webinars where I go over the disaster loans, the SBA disaster loans. Tomorrow we have someone from the SBA coming on. So if you have a question you've been dying to ask somebody at the top Shop SBA of any issues or concerns you're having with your loan, please join us tomorrow for Thursday to be able to ask that question live. And Sadie will be sure to put the link in for that. So once again, thank you to all our frequent flyers that are here every week. I saw Emma in the chat as well. Love having you here. And if you're new, it's so much fun and you learn. You got to join us every week. And if you don't get to see an episode, you can always see it on a past episode. So thank you again for watching Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Bye, everybody. Bye,
Bye.
Sebastian.